You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hey, hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're on another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, I've got an amazing guest that's going to visit with us. She's done a lot of things in her life and career, and most important, she is now talking to people about eliminating fear. And I think we all, as human beings, we get to that place when a decision is in front of us, or a change or an uncertainty, and there's that old beast fear that bubbles up and impacts what we may or may not be able to do. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask her to tell her story. Her name is Rhonda Britten. That may ring a bell. She's been on TV, so you might have seen some of her great and entertaining work there, but I'm going to let her tell that story. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
You betcha. You betcha. So if we can keep it sort of short, can you kind of give us the flyover of your journey and how you got into the work you're doing now?
Oh, well, I think that you're referring to the worst day of my life, so I'll make that brief. But I really do think that so many of the seeds of our destiny are sowed in the worst days of our life. You know, we don't see it at the time, of course, we only see it in hindsight.
Yeah.
But why I do what I do today is really birthed in that worst day of my life. I was 14 years old. I grew up in a little tiny town in Upper Michigan, 365 inches of snow a year, little tiny town, 2 restaurants, Douglas House Buffet Hotel and Big Boy. That's all we had. We didn't have fancy McDonald's. My parents were separated, middle of getting a divorce. It was Father's Day, and my father was coming to take us out to Sunday brunch. So my mom's in her bedroom. She's puffing up her beehive, putting on her blue eyeshadow, got a rose-colored lipstick. My dad comes walking in. Let's go, let's go. My 2 sisters are in our one bathroom fighting it out. And as me and my mom and dad start walking out, my sister's still in the bathroom fighting it out. It's starting to sprinkle. My dad says he's got to get his coat from the car. Now, this coat is a tan Naugahyde leisure suit coat. And you, I bet, remember those because those were pretty hot in the day. And so he opens his trunk to get his coat. And instead of a coat, out of the corner of my eye, I see that he's grabbed a gun. And he starts yelling at my mother, "You made me do this, you made me do this," and he fires. And I start screaming, "Dad, what are you doing, Dad? What are you doing? Stop, Dad, what are you doing?" And he cocks the gun and he points it at me. And I think I'm next. And he blinks and I blink and he blinks and I blink. And my mother, literally with her last breath, screams out, "No, don't." My father, realizing she's still alive, takes that bullet intended for me and shoots her a second time. This time it moves through her abdomen, out her back, lands in the car horn, and for the next 20 minutes, all I hear is, eh. My father takes the gun, cocks it one more time, puts it to his head and fires. In the middle in 2 minutes, I was the sole witness of watching my father murder my mother and commit suicide in front of me. Now, I don't know what you would have done, but this is what I did. I blamed myself because I did nothing heroic that day, right? I didn't grab the gun. I didn't kick him in the shins. I didn't jump in front of my mother. I did nothing heroic. And on that day, I like to, looking back at it, I think, like many people would have, I split into 2. The "I'm fine, Rhonda." "Oh, I'm fine. No, everything's I'm fine. I'm fine, Rhonda." And the Rhonda who is filled with regret and guilt and shame. And that Rhonda can never be happy again because when you watch your parents die and you don't do anything, you can't be happy again. So for the next 20 years, I lived between these 2 people. One, I got the good Rhonda, the fine Rhonda, got a scholarship to college, right? I was the only female on the finance board of University of Minnesota, which was the largest enrollment college in the country at the time. But the inside Rhonda was discovering alcohol and becoming an alcoholic and starting to get DUIs and just deciding to kill herself. So I did 3 DUIs. I had 3 suicide attempts. And it was that 3rd suicide attempt that I realized something. I'm not very good at killing myself. I'm not good at that. And by the way, they put you in a psychiatric ward when you try to kill yourself 3 times. So they put me in a psychiatric ward. They deemed me not crazy, let me go. And I remember going back into my little tiny studio apartment at the time and realizing that there's got to be another way. Now, during all those years of, DUIing and alcoholizing and suiciding, I also was reading books and going to therapy and going to workshops. I was a self-help junkie, and I had planned on being a minister when I was 13. So I was doing everything I could to help myself. But it was only after that third suicide attempt when I'm in my little tiny studio apartment and realize everything I've learned was good knowledge, and I have tools, but I didn't know what was stopping me from applying them. I didn't know what was holding me back. I had a lot of smarts, but why couldn't my life get better? And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think a lot of people that consider themselves smart get so frustrated. It's like, why can't I fix this? Why can't I make this better? Well, that's where I was. Why can't I do this? And I remember saying to myself, well, what do they do in kindergarten? Well, they get a calendar and gold stars. So I went to the store, got a calendar and gold stars. And for the next 30 days, every day, anytime I did anything good, I gave myself a gold star. And that gold star was, I'm talking about the level of evolution I was at was like getting angry and not breaking anything. That's where I was. But it was like, hey, I gave myself a gold star. And at the end of 30 days, I started recognizing that I could change my life. And I just didn't know how or what was stopping me. And that put me on a journey to really understand fear because most of my life, I never even acknowledged fear or believed I was afraid. I mean, even after my parents died, if you would have asked me at their funeral if I was afraid, I would have said no. If you would have asked me after a second suicide attempt if I was scared, I would have said no because I had no relationship to fear. I had no understanding of being scared. I had no connection to it. So it was only after that third suicide attempt when I was down on my knees and recognizing all the work I had done while it was good wasn't getting me to change my life, wasn't getting me where I wanted to go. I had to face the thing that I was, of course, ultimately afraid of, which is how is fear holding me back? And just asking that question was revolutionary for me because, again, I had no relationship to fear. So that's really what started me on this journey. Of course, I didn't start being who I am today the minute I stopped that third suicide attempt. It took me a few years after that in order to really fall into the work I do today, which is helping people master fear as a keynote speaker, an author, and a master coach, an Emmy Award winner, et cetera. But when I started understanding fear, everything changed.
So, how in
All
the
the
world?
work,
Let
yeah.
me ask maybe what hopefully for some is the obvious question. What fear was associated with what you had experienced? Was it fear of what? Fear of.
Well, I mean, you could call a bunch of things. So as I moved out into the world with this shame on my back, right, as my father as a murderer, and I am now a daughter of a murderer, the fear of abandonment, I was
Okay.
abandoned, right? The fear of rejection, the fear of failure. And that's the thing that most people don't recognize is I think when people hear fearless living is the name of my company, name of my book, name of everything I do is help you become more fearless. They immediately go to physical fears, right? Like, oh, well, I'm not afraid. I scuba dive. I climb mountains, I open businesses. I'm not afraid. And I remember this guy in Atlanta, Georgia. He's like 6'3", comes to my speaking events, like, I'm just came to tell you I'm not afraid. And I'm like, yay, you. And can I give you a little test? And he's like, sure, because he's feeling like so brave. And I said, great. So have you forgiven? Can you say I love you first? Can you say I'm sorry? And I asked him all these emotional questions, and his face went, wah, 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 wah. So, all of those people out there who consider themselves fearless, many times where they're not fearless is the emotional fears. And
Yeah.
physical fears don't run our life every day. It's the emotional fears that do the fear of
Yeah.
loss, the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the
And
fear of success.
it's the masking that when I hear that story of that guy, it's that masking of there is something somewhere you just don't want to admit it,
Well,
and you
but you don't even see it. And that's
right.
the thing. People are so quick to go, well, I'm not saying I'm sorry because I did nothing wrong, right? Or, I'm not accepting them in my life because that person is so and so. So they're so busy judging and keeping people away from them and so blaming that they can't even see their own part and parcel of it. They're so busy looking outside and blaming and shaming everybody else that they can't see how they're contributing to the problem and they can't see their own fear.
Well, so what I heard you saying when you were naming your fears as you identified them, that was kind of a projection. You were projecting that you wouldn't be accepted or you wouldn't be loved or wouldn't be embraced, right?
Well,
Because
you can say that, sure. I mean, we can call it projection, we can call it whatever we want, but just because I'm projecting it doesn't mean it's not real inside of me in the moment, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
when we psychologicalize everything, right? When we go, well, this is why it's happening, it's like, okay, well, that's good, but I'm still stuck with the feeling of fear of rejection, right? So that's one of the reasons. The question you're asking me is the very reason I created what I call the wheel of fear and the wheel of freedom. Because most people think, well, I don't have a fear of rejection or a fear of failure or a fear of success or fear of loss or fear of uncertainty. But I promise you, everybody has a fear of something. And when we can identify that, and again, what I call the wheel of fear, when we can identify that fear that unconsciously, neurobiologically runs your life without your conscious knowing, then everything changes.
So, wow, where to go? Where to go next?
Well, I can give you a quiz. I can give you a fear quiz and help people.
Ooh,
Yeah.
do I want to
Are
do
you
that?
are you are
Okay.
you open, Doug? Are you a brave man and willing to take a fear quiz?
Sure. Why
So,
not? Why not?
so what you're saying, Doug, really is that most people think of fear as, I'm afraid of loss, right? Which, of course, is a true fear of uncertainty. Of course, that's a real fear. But really, how fear runs our life is by what I call fear responses. And we think those are our problems. We think those are the things that are wrong with us. Those are the things that we have to fix. Those are our character flaws. Those are the things that we identify with that I need to change this. So I am going to read a quick little quiz, make it super quick. And if you're willing, and you can play along if you're watching or listening, if you're in a safe place, please do. And I'm going to read a list of words, and if you do any of these things or feel any of these things, then there's fear there. There's some fear going on, right? So, you ready, Doug?
Okay.
Okay. And so, if you're willing, for those listening and watching, please nod your head if you do any of these things or feel any of these things. So, do you ever isolate? Do you ever pretend everything's okay when it's not? Do you ever hide out? Do you ever whine? Do you ever compare? Do you ever secretly manipulate? Do you judge? Do you get defensive? Do you complain? What about procrastinate? What about wait and call it patience? Do you worry? Do you feel like you struggle? Do you want to take control? Do you deflect? What about blame? Do you ever feel bitter, powerless, dissatisfied, resentful, entitled? Do you ever feel guilty, disappointed? Do you find yourself as a perfectionist or a people pleaser? Do you ever feel overwhelmed, irritated, like now, me reading these words? What about ignored, get caught in self pity, annoyed? What about feeling like a victim? So, when I talk to an audience, whether it's 1,000 people or 100 people, 95% of the audience shakes their head and nods their head at 95% of these. So, this is
Yeah,
what
I
I
was just
go
I
ahead.
was just saying you successfully stepped on all 10 toes.
Yes, yes, Doug, yes. Well, this is how fear shows up in our life. These are our fear responses. So you don't feel guilty unless there's a fear underneath. You don't get overwhelmed unless there's a fear underneath. You don't complain unless there's a fear underneath. You don't compare unless there's a fear underneath. So I'm attempting to support people in understanding that core fear that runs our life from an invisible prison-like place that is literally like the undercurrent of what's going on in our life unless we are awake and aware. So we think, I can't tell you how many people say, well, I know I have a fear of rejection. It's like, well, you have a fear response probably as a fear of rejection, but your fear underneath, what I call the wheel of fear, the core fear, probably something different because our neurobiology is wired for this. And the one of the ways it's wired is it doesn't want to be found because if you find it, it can't trick you, it can't save you, it can't support you, it can't keep you safe. And fear has one job and one job only, that's to keep us alive. And our job is to our personal job, of course, is to live our passion and our purpose. Well, that's facing our death lots of different ways all day long. The death of our ego, the death of et cetera, the death of our image, the death of, who we think we are, et cetera. So the wheel of fear, um, one of the first things you can do is just starting to recognize your fear responses because that's how your fear, the most aware, the easiest way to start becoming aware of how often fear is running your life.
Hmm. So, what are some of those classic fear responses?
Well, bitter, angry, uh, complaining, comparing. So everything I just read are fear responses. So
Hmm.
when people think of them as problems, I procrastinate. I just wish I could quit procrastinate. If I could quit procrastinate, then I could live my dream. Well, procrastination isn't actually the issue. It is the fear underneath. So again, are you going to have some tools for procrastination? Sure. But what we do is we beat ourselves up and we hold ourselves back, blaming ourselves and thinking we have weak will, weak character, etc. That these are character flaws, that there's something wrong with me if I complain, if I manipulate, if I get defensive, if I feel overwhelmed, if I procrastinate. And so then we shame ourselves, beat ourselves up, and right, we take down our self-esteem because we're saying like it's wrong and bad, and what kind of person am I if I can't do this? All of that is fear-based. And so what I support people in identifying is what I call, again, the wheel of fear, and finding their core fear that identifies and creates these fear responses. So anytime people have problems, when a client comes to me or a student comes to me and they're having like, I procrastinate, or I don't have confidence, or I want to have more courage, again, whatever it is, let's get underneath and actually find that core fear that's driving this whole train, instead of shaming and blaming ourselves, beating ourselves up, because negative self-talk is the number one gas for the wheel. Like, you fill that gas tank up with that beating ourselves up. So in the world of fearless living, no, not allowed to beat yourself up anymore, because you're just playing into fear's hands.
So, in all your work, is there such a thing as top five most common fears
Yes,
people struggle with?
there is. There's the top 10 fears that most people struggle with. So
Okay,
again,
let's hit those.
one thing that I do want to say is that most people don't identify with these. Like, I'm going to share my core, what I call the core trigger, which is the core fear. Mine is loser. Now,
Hmm.
no one's called me a loser my whole entire life. I was the only woman on the University of Minnesota finance committee when I was a freshman in college, and University of Minnesota had the largest enrollment in the country, and that was pretty prestigious. I was on a committee with the president of the university, right? Like, I got a full ride to college, right? Like, I was the soapbox derby queen. I was the leading scorer of my basketball team, right? Like, I was the soloist in the choir, right? There's nobody called me a loser. But when you get underneath it, that fear of anybody thinking or seeing or believing in any way, shape, or form that I could be a loser. When I identified this word, loser, it was shocking to me, but it also felt so real. It was like a gut punch, right? Like, it's true, but you don't want it to be true. And then I have all my evidence to prove I'm not a loser. I'm not a loser. Look, I'm not a loser. But in fact, that's the fear that I have, is that if you know me, if you see me, then you're going to know that I'm a loser. So the top 10 fears are you willing to be seen or named or labeled as selfish?
Hmm.
Is it okay if you look stupid? What about weak? Are you okay with appearing weak or people calling you weak? What about incompetent? Is that okay? Are you okay with just being ordinary like everyone else? What about a loser like me? What about fake? If one of the people you admire the most came up to you and said, you're fake, how would you do? What about lazy? What about invisible? And what about rejected? So those are the top 10 core triggers that people walk around with, that are unbeknownst to them, because they're so busy changing the chairs in the Titanic, being distracted by their fear responses.
Hmm. Thinking about a number of things, but one of which is, and I've run into this. I lived it myself for a chapter in my life, and I've watched executives live it and now talk about it as I had coached with them, and that is kind of this idea of living a dual life.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
You
Yeah.
and it's typically split between how you show up at work and how you show up at home,
Yeah.
and it can be driven either way. And I've seen it go both ways. It can be a horrible, what show at work, but you show up as the happy guy. Everything's fine at home. Everything's okay. Don't want the family to worry about you might be losing your job, or the company might be closing down or relocating, or all that stuff. Or it goes the other way.
Yeah.
You've got a show at home, and you want to go to work and be all that, just
Everybody's buddy. Everybody, yeah, I'm great. I'm
you know
amazing.
the,
Yeah.
the good guy with all the answers and everything. And at one point, I have talked in some forums about a life experience myself of going on a long kind of curative journey. And specifically, the year was 1995 for me, and it was an accumulation of a bunch of stuff in my early years. I didn't have one big day like you described by any means, but I did have a collection of things that kind of kept piling up. And finally, there was a tipping point, and 1995 became my year of exploration and journey. And um, but one of the things that came out of that was this realization I was forcing myself to live this dual life. And I described it as kind of some of the sci-fi movies have. I would peel out of this one skin and from home and get in the car to go to work. And as I was driving, I was putting on this other skin.
That's
And
right.
then I would show up, ta-da, and
Yeah.
everything would be great and wonderful.
Yep.
But then as I was driving home, I knew what I was going into, and that was the negative part of what was in my life. And so I would peel off the nice, bright,
Shiny
clean
suit.
skin,
Yep.
so to speak,
Hmm.
hang it by the back door, and go in and deal with whatever was going to hit me when I walked in.
Yep.
And it's a horrible way to live, to say the least.
Yep. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about. So, I've created, like I said, the wheel of fear, but also the wheel of freedom. And so one of those lives probably was you living more on the wheel of freedom, you being your authentic self more. And one of them was probably led more by fear, right? So people do that all day long, as you know. So we're living these lives where we're trying to decide which part of us to show ourselves, which part to show up as, right? Who should I show up as today? Oh, I'm hanging out with these people. This is who I should be. Oh, I'm, dealing with this problem. This is how I should be. So when we're not an integrated whole, when we're not who we are at all times, when we can't rely on our own skill set and our own core, let's say, the core of who we are, the essential nature of who we are, then we're always playing this game, and that's exhausting. It's exhausting, it's debilitating, it's defeating, because I know for me, when I obviously went through many years of what you're talking about, and you do feel, I know I felt crazy, right? Like, it's like, how can I be successful over here? And how can I be such a failure over here? And it was so demeaning and demoralizing. And, if I got everything going on over here, why can't I apply that amazing human being I am over here? Over here, why can't those things work? And that's really what the Wheel of Fear and the Wheel of Freedom answers. It's like, okay, well, first of all, just to become an observer, the Wheel of Fear gives you that opportunity to become an observer. And so you can see what's happening instead of being in it. Then you can walk through, like, so the minute something's happening to me, let's say I'm doing one of my fear responses. Let's say I'm blaming. Okay. I, Rhonda Britten, know that's a fear response because that's the first order of business, just recognizing what's a fear response. So I'm blaming. I'm doing a fear response. Well, if I'm doing a fear response, then I know my wheel of fear has been activated. Well, then, Rhonda, where is loser showing up right now? Where is it that you're afraid to be seen as a loser? So that's one thing. The second part is to get back to the wheel, get on the wheel of freedom, which my wheel of freedom, my essential nature, the part of me that I hide, your essential nature is the part of you that you hide when it's not safe for you to be yourself. And the part of me that I hide is being authentic. So here I am blaming, shaming, whatever, complaining, manipulating, whatever I'm doing. I recognize it. I go, okay, wait a minute, Rhonda, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Where is it? What is it that you're afraid you could be seen or thought of as a loser? Okay, well, what could you do instead? Okay, how could you be authentic in this moment? Well, being authentic in that moment might be scarier than bejeebers. But I also know it's my way out, it's my freedom. If I am willing to act from my essential nature, the part of me that is really the integrated whole, then the problem, I see it through a different lens, and I see my life through a different lens, and I'm able to take action from a different place. And so my job as Rhonda Britten to live more authentically as me, to have an integrated life, to be one person instead of those two split like you talked about,
Yeah.
is how do I be authentic in each and every moment? And to be authentic in each and every moment, you know what? I got to learn skills. I got to learn how to communicate. I got to learn things so that I can show up as me. And sometimes I have to do it, shaking my boots and, feeling like I'm going to fail miserably. It's like, okay, so what?
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that sets me free. That unhooks the automatic responses on the wheel of fear. It unhooks the fear responses because they are no longer driving my behavior. I'm choosing my behavior.
So let me play devil's advocate for a minute. I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
understand. I think I understand the bulk of it. So, what about the scenario where you're saying, and I'll use my scenario as the example, that cloak I had to take off that was the darkness in my life.
Mhm.
My environmental scenario was I had chosen a bad marriage partner, and I mean, and I'm not saying she was a bad person. I'm just saying
No.
together we were
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
Individually, we were
Yeah.
wonderful people, but what we had was not good.
Mhm.
And so it's like if I tried to be my true self, it
Mhm.
wasn't acceptable. It was pushed back. It was ridiculed. It was,
Yeah.
belittled. It was all that.
Yes.
And at the sake of sounding like blaming or making an excuse, how does one deal with that when the environment is not accepting the truth of who and what you are?
Yes, but that forces you, as it did for you, it forces you to recognize that this environment isn't safe for you, that this environment isn't yours. So many people blame the environment, which I know you're not doing because you did end up leaving that marriage. But many people blame their spouse. Many people blame their job, their boss, right? They have to blame somebody instead of looking and going, well, how can I learn skills in order to manage this differently, in order to be different with them? How can I release my desire to be seen a certain way? What skill do I need in order to maneuver this more powerfully? And it might be that you leave your job. It might be that you leave your marriage. But I've seen so many marriages saved by understanding how fear works and instead taking full responsibility for how you show up. Because if you show up as fully yourself, like from a loving, let's just say from a loving place, from a compassionate place, from an accepting place, and your spouse is, blaming, ridiculing, etc., it becomes so much more evident. It becomes so crystal clear that it's unavoidable to take action that is necessary and needed.
Yeah,
But what we do as human beings is we try to patch it all together so that we don't have to make those bold moves, that we don't have to make those decisions. I had one
that's it.
client, I had one client who came to me because her boss was very abusive. And she came to me because she goes, I want to leave my job. And I said, great, totally, totally cool. Let's leave your job, right? So, on one hand, I help somebody make their goal or dream happen. So, she wants to leave her job. But on the other hand, I'm constantly also helping my clients build their skills so they have more choice. So I said to her, well, do you want this type of guy, this type of person, your boss, to run your life the rest of your life? Or do you want to learn how to handle somebody like him? And she goes, well, I want to learn how to handle somebody like him. I go, great. So then we worked together so that she treated him and talked to him and behaved around him in a completely different way. And the way he started treating her changed 100%. And he might have treated other people in the business the way he used to treat her, but he never treated her that way again. And when she left, when she finally did leave, he was the only person that he ever had said, you have a job here anytime, you can come back anytime, because she was not intimidated, uh, less than around him. She stayed in her whole body, stayed in her full self. And this happens to marriage that a couple come to an event in Lexington, Kentucky, and they were divorced. And they sat in the front row and they said, we just have to come and tell you this. I'm like, well, what is it? So the husband actually is the one that found Fearless Living, started doing the work of Fearless Living. And they were already divorced. And he called it, he goes, wait a minute, if me and my wife would do Fearless Living, do you think our marriage could be saved? So he called his ex-wife up. They'd been divorced now a few years and said, I'm doing this thing called Fearless Living. Would you be willing to do it with me? And she did, and they remarried, and they're like two kids, like that, like the cutest little two kids you ever saw. So joyful because now they have a language and a way to talk to each other about what's going on. Now, the difference between what happened with my client and maybe what happened with you or other people is they have to have a willing spouse, right? You have to have a willing
Right.
spouse, right? So he had a willing spouse to go, okay, I'm willing to do this. And I can't tell you how many marriages have been saved using Fearless Living or how many jobs have been saved or how many I had one guy come to me who kept on getting demoted, and within a year, he was president of the same company he kept getting demoted at. So these are the things that you literally start seeing the world differently. You start treating the world differently. You start seeing yourself differently so that you can rise above and transcend the thing that's been holding you back.
So let's talk about some of the classic, I'll call them symptoms or behavior patterns that people talk about. And the top one on my list is the workaholic. And
Yeah.
a little bit of perfectionism balled up in there, but more so just the idea that somewhere they've got something going on that says, I've just got to work a whole lot more and harder than everybody else. And
Mhm.
so what root fear does that typically spawn from?
I don't know because everybody's is different. That could come
Oh,
from a
okay.
trigger trigger. That could come from an incompetent trigger. That could come like a stupid trigger. That literally could come from any trigger. So a fear response doesn't tie perfectly to a core trigger.
Okay.
Me and you might have different core triggers. Like your core trigger could be, I'm afraid. Your core fear could be, I don't want to look stupid, and mine could be loser. But we both could do the same behaviors, right?
Okay.
So workaholism is driven obviously by a need to feel important, to be seen. So that could be ordinary trigger, that could be loser trigger, that could be incompetent trigger. Yeah.
Okay. And then, it is interesting. I'm thinking about the person that, and this is generic. I'm not naming a name or anything, but multiple observations. The person that has had a good trajectory at a company, and then all of a sudden everything seems to start going against them. They get demoted from the job they've got with no real explanation or reason. They're not fired, but they're just asked to step back, maybe lose a title or even take a little bit of a pay cut. And then one thing after another, it just seems to keep snowballing. And on the surface, you could, an outside observer would say, well, the company's changing. There's been all this change at the top. Your old champions are all gone now. And so, the new people aren't. And again, it's kind of what's the right word? It's an acquittal of any personal responsibility for what's going on. It's like, well, you should have a pass and you shouldn't beat yourself up over that because look at the world around you, how bad it's changing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Regardless of all of that being real, like your ex-wife being, difficult and the culture of the company changing, those things are real. Okay, those are real. Those are factual things that you can point to and prove, and everybody can, click a check mark and say, yes, that all happened. But that's not the point of our lives. The point of our lives is to have self-mastery, to have sovereignty, to have authority, to have agency. So if you're getting demoted in this moment, while it might be true the company's changing, all of that might be true. The question for the person who's being demoted is, okay, what skill do I need? How do I need to show up differently? Where am I not telling the truth? Where am I not being honest with myself? Where am I not standing up for myself? Where am I not speaking up? Where am I compromising myself? Where am I lowering my values? Where am I taking myself down to quote unquote put up with this, right? So that's the point of life, is not to prove other people are treating you poorly. But okay, so they're treating me poorly. My father killed my mother. Okay. I could be an alcoholic right now and be homeless, and everybody would be like, well, you know why she's homeless? And everybody like shake their head and go, nod their head and go, yeah. It is always in the personal responsibility of like, well, how do you want to evolve? How do you want to grow? How do you want to, learn more skills? Because every single person on the planet, myself included, I still have skills to learn. I still have awarenesses to achieve. I still have surrenders to make. I still have forgiveness to do, right? I have a lot, like I had this one client who came to me and he made a lot of money. I think he was a seven-figure business entrepreneur, and he was in a workshop of mine. And I was talking about fear like I am with you. And he goes, well, I raised his hand. I just want to quit making a lot of money and losing a lot of money. And I said, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. And he goes, my father and my grandfather did the same thing. They made millions and millions of dollars and lost it all. Then they made millions and millions of dollars and lost it all. And then they made millions of, I don't want to keep doing it. I'm doing the same thing. And I looked at him because he wanted me to tell him like a strategy, a tip, a technique, right? He wanted me to give him a quick little answer. And I said to him, have you forgiven your father and grandfather for giving you that pattern? Have you forgiven them? And he looked at me like I had told him to swallow a snake. Like, like, what? And I said, yeah, you're carrying the pattern. And in order to belong to your father and grandfather, in order to feel like a man in your family, this is what they do. You must forgive them. You must actually look at them as two human beings, not, flawed, yes, but they were just doing what they were doing to manage their own emotional life. And they didn't have any other tools. So they were good at making money, but then they didn't, whatever was going on in their psyche, they had to lose it all. So the answer is forgiveness. And a lot of people in the business world don't reach out to forgiveness to heal the pain in their job, right? They just look at it as give me a strategy, give me a tip, give me a technique, tell me what to say, which again, yes, no problem. But there's also something different, also something deeper, which is you might have to forgive somebody, including yourself, in order to free up that energy, in order to change the atmosphere around you, in order to change your ability to see who you are. It might be forgiveness as your tool.
My brain is starting to go into overdrive here, so
I love
I
it.
know I got to kind of rein this in. But the question going through my mind is, okay, we've talked a lot about maybe historic sort of circumstances that have been the breeding ground for these fears we bring into us. But what about ongoing changes in life that might
Yeah,
introduce new fears?
that's right.
How,
Well,
how
so
does that work?
so fundamentally, the way our neurobiology works and the way therapy, neuroscience, et cetera, describes it is that we basically form to a certain extent by the time we're 7. Okay. So the way our neurobiology works, it doesn't know the difference between real or imagined events, doesn't know the difference. And our neurobiology is based on safety. So when we have a problem in our current life, what we will automatically do is look in the past for a solution in order to apply to the present in order to create a new future. So the fear only cares like, well, Doug's alive right now. I've been doing a good job. Doug's alive. I'm amazing. So fear wants you to keep repeating what you've been doing in order for you to stay alive, because that's all fear cares about. Fear doesn't care if you're successful or happy. It only cares if you're alive. So that wheel of fear, and oh, one more thing is that research now, neuroscience is discovering that some of our fears are actually handed down through our DNA. So you don't have to have a horrible event like me growing up in order to have a wheel of fear. Everybody has one. It's wired into us. So your job is to find that hardwired, so to speak, core fear, because that will actually be with you the rest of your life. So whether you get married, whether you get a new boss, whether you have a new goal, whatever's happening now, I still work my loser trigger. I still work it. It's amazing when I find myself doing any fear response to this day. Doesn't matter what I call the stretch, risk, or dies that I'm taking. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's new. Doesn't mean if I've done it before. If I am doing a fear response, if I'm procrastinating, if I'm blaming, if I'm manipulating, if I'm trying to control, if I'm, feeling powerless, etc., I just go, okay, where am I? Where am I wanting to be seen as a winner instead of a loser, right? Where am I wanting to be seen as more than that fear tells me I am, right? And then again, I go back over to authentic. Becoming authentic has served me for the last 30 years because in every fear that I'm facing, the first thing that I hide is being authentic. The first thing I put away is authentic. And so it doesn't matter if it's a fear that's at 15 or a fear that's happening at 40 or a fear that's happening at 60. It's being driven by the same mechanism.
Mm. Fascinating stuff, and I've talked on this show about, and this is maybe just very elemental influencers, but things we get told as kids and young people, the classic, you're not pretty enough, you're not smart enough, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, all those things that tell you, and my listeners have heard me say about the guy in my master's program that made me promise I'd never get a job in the U.S. banking system because he didn't think I understood finance very well. And, I did 25 years in banking and worked for the FDIC and did a bunch of other stuff,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I kind of laugh at that now. I could have taken that and really made it be something,
Right.
but even a couple of years later, when I got the opportunity to do a career change and start looking for work, and I ended up at a bank, I actually hadn't even thought twice about what that gentleman had said to me, but it,
Mm-hmm.
it dawned on me. I think I'd gotten my first officer promotion at the bank, and then it clicked. I said, "Oh, I wonder what old Plus Budget's doing these days. I wonder
Right,
how his
right,
life's going
right,
on."
right, right. So,
And
this is the cool thing is, the more loved you are and supported you are and guided you are, or I'll just say, go back to accepted that you are growing up. Does that give you an upper, little step up? Sure, 100%. Because in those situations, in those environments, you're more apt to be okay to be afraid, right? Because you're accepted and loved for who you are. Sadly, most of us aren't raised in that environment, right? Most of us don't have that unconditional love, even though we know our parents love us in some way, shape, or form. We don't actually feel it, and it doesn't fill ourselves up. So we constantly go out in the world trying to fill those holes that we perceive that we have. And that wheel of fear and that wheel of freedom are what guides us. So I always say to people, there are probably, let's say there's 9 areas of life, right? Career, creative, intimate relationships, family, etc. You might be on your wheel of freedom and fearless, like 8 out of the 9 areas. Like already, you might be in the flow, you might know what to do, you might got it all together. Awesome. So, what I always remind my clients is that what's the area that's not working for you, right? What's the area that's not? So, like when your example of, well, your relationship wasn't working for you, your career was, it's like, okay, so your relationship's not working for you. Let's talk about that. Let's apply the wheel of fear and wheel of freedom to that relationship, because then it becomes very clear how the wheel of fear and wheel of freedom work. When you're trying to apply it to something that's already working, it might be like, whoa, I don't need that. Well, of course, because you're already fearless. So awesome. You're in the flow. So many of us have areas that we're doing well. So we want to look at the areas where we're frustrated with ourselves, where we just, why can't I get it better? Because that actually lays out much easier how you're on your wheel of fear.
yeah, and I know the one thought I had a moment ago that we skipped over, but I go back to my experience in my journey of 1995, and one of the senior mentor guides I had, he wasn't a licensed therapist or anything like that. He was just a guy who himself had gone through a lot of discovery and healing and had done a lot of work with hundreds of people to help them too. As I kind of got near the end of that journey, he said to me, he said, "It's going to get darker before it gets better." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You're discovering the real truth about your reality right now, all facets of it." And he said, "When you start controlling the spotlight, your spouse is not going to be happy about it."
Right. That's right. No, no, not happy at all. Not
And,
happy one bit. Right. And,
and,
and
th-
that's the
and,
thing.
and this will become a self-selection exercise.
That's right. That's right. So that's the thing, I always feel when people come to me, whether they're 40, 52, 73, 68, one of the things they're most afraid of is that they're going to lose their marriage, or they're going to lose their friends, or their family's not going to appreciate them, and all those things. And that's the crux, right? We are hanging on to, uh, you know, tidbits of love, tidbits of acceptance, the ragtags of, oh, I'm respected this much. That's enough for me. But when we start becoming who we are meant to be, when we start what I call live the life your soul intended, what's really meant for us, the things that you found acceptable become unacceptable. And it doesn't make those people wrong or bad. It just means that it's no longer acceptable to you. And many people are afraid that then they're going to lose their friends and family. And it's like, well, this is the thing you have to remember. If you're not being yourself, if you're not living the life that's true for you, and you are acting as a piece and parcel of yourself rather than the whole thing, and you want to keep that piece and parcel, then you actually aren't loved and respected and supported as you. You are only loved, respected as long as you play this role.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not actually loved. as
Right.
yourself,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that's why it's so frustrating and annoying, because here you are attempting to truly love, and yet you're accepting, scraps. And it's like, well, I'm doing all these things. Yeah, but you're still accepting scraps. And so, yeah, it does. I always say it takes great humility to be aware, because when you become aware, not only does a surge of energy move through you and go like, the lights turn on, you're like, oh my God, I can do this. Oh my God, this is possible. Also, all the ways that you compromised yourself and all the ways that you let yourself down, all those regrets will also come to the surface. So it is a moment of great humility to say, I feel the surge of energy. I feel the passion. I see the light. And oh, now I've got to clean up what I've done in the past. And again, maybe not with that other person, may not happen to be with that other person, but for your own self, for your own soul, forgiving yourself, for surrendering, accepting, et cetera, doing all the work internally so that you can walk away with
Yep.
yourself.
Yep. Yep. Well, Rhonda, this has been great, and I think we are about up on time for this episode, but thank you so much for sharing all this. I hope, folks, that this has been a fresh light of opportunity and encouragement for you. And if you want to know more, Rhonda, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
Go to fearlessliving.org, and I'd love to give a free course to help people cure that procrastination and start seeing their wheel of fear in action, start seeing how their dreams, their goals, their plans, why they keep getting sidetracked, so to speak, or why they slow down. It's called Stretch, Risk, or Die. Go to fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK, fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK, and you're going to put your name and your email in. You're going to get access to our Fearless You platform. And in there is going to be a course called Stretch, Risk, or Die. It's 3 15-minute videos and super easy. It's got workbooks, templates, everything you need. And it's going to show you what's been stopping you from your goals, dreams, and plans, but more importantly, how to move through it. And then on the third video, I actually walk you through the wheel of fear. So you're going to see me lay out the wheel of fear in motion. And I'm in this course, I'm actually talking to a group, I'm actually talking to a company. And so you're also going to hear their questions. So it's going to be very interactive. So go to fearlessliving.org/risk, RISK, and grab that course. And then you'll find out way more about how Fearless Living can support you.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely have that link in the show notes, folks. So if you're out and about and can't get to the show notes, just make a mental note and remind yourself when you do get a safe place, check it out, and we'll have that information for you. But one last time, Rhonda, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be good, and I think it is. So thank you.
Thank you. Be fearless.
Well, folks, we are going to wrap this up. I do want to remind you we've got a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives, and leave us your feedback and comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you need to get a hold of me to talk about your business journey and your own leadership development by common sense, reach out to me on my website, dougthorpe.com. There's plenty of places there. You can either schedule a free consultation or take advantage of some of the resources I've got. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye, sign off. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.